and this process works really well, and I think it's worked really well so far. So today is this is just 1 week of community engagement. We'll have community engagement in June and throughout the summer. The idea is to wrap up our study of our sphere of influence and growth by September. But we're going to do that with your feedback today, and we're going to start in this collective audience, and then break into little groups with our felt pens, and draw over the maps, and put your ideas down on those maps. And all this will be recorded in a report that includes an update of our urban growth and outcomes and the goals and strategies that our community has built through this community engagement process. So we're here to listen, and we're here to facilitate, but we're relying on feedback from the community to tell us what your priorities are. We've already learned some really great things. We've had 5 meetings. We had as many as 30 people in our economic development meeting, all represented by our Economic Development Citizens Advisory Committee. See, I can say it too now that I've heard it so many times from the community member. That's Brian Fouch, our Assistant City Manager, Community Development Director here, who is running that committee. And we have 2 council members here so far, Councilmember Freeman and Councilmember Friels. Thank you very much. The council and commissioners were invited. We have David Medeiros, Commissioner Medeiros is here, HRB Chair and Planning Commissioner. And have I missed anybody other the commissioners? I don't see any. We have Michelle, thank you so much. Michelle, thank you for the use of your facility. Her superintendent was up at 5 this morning in here dusting off the stage and polishing everything up. So if everybody would buy him a bottle of wine for the weekend, that would be really good. He likes red wine. Okay, thanks, Michelle. Thank you so much for the use of your facility. We are going to be considering a joint use agreement with the school district soon, which will open up new recreational opportunities. It's really exciting. So with that, Brian has a few slides to explain pretty much the genesis of why we're here and what our goals are. They are big goals, and this is a big project. So we're glad to get it started. This is all funded from the state of California, an SB2 grant, and Colin's looking at me, and I forgot to introduce Colin, our supervisor from District 2. Thank you. And I don't know, do you want to introduce the consulting team?
You can do that.
Okay. Ann Burton with Blue Zones is working not just on our urban growth plan, but we'll have a lot of community outreach involved in something called an active transportation plan. That's an engineering term for trails. Active transportation is when you use your feet and your legs and things, and when you get out of your car. So the Strategic Planning Committee came to me early in 2019, John Freeman and others, and said, we need to connect all the dots in our community, and that's what this $200,000 grant will do. And Dan will be facilitating that, and that's part of this conversation, including the Enza Trail and other assets in the region. And Dan is supported the VMC, and then Michael from the VMC is here, principal of VMC, and James, who used to be our planner, right?
Yes,
yes.
Planning director.
Was the planning director years ago in our community. And that's
Insane.
it. We have the Ag Trust here. Jim.
Lynn Overtree with the San Benito Agricultural.
Lynn Overtree with the San Benito Ag Trust. Okay, thank you. She's been at a lot of our meetings because we're talking to the property owners surrounding our city as well as the property owners in our city. So the way we grow, I know the school district's interested in how big we're going to grow, how fast. So thank you for coming in. And with that, Brian, you can go ahead.
Yeah.
Okay, so we have a few slides just to get you up to date on where we are. Thank you.
Yeah, so what I'd like to do is just sort of run real quickly through a few slides that will provide an opportunity for people to see how did we get here, and why we're here is pretty evident as we go through the evening. But how we got here is, first of all, we have an existing sphere of influence. It's that big rectangular area. And this sphere of influence has not been approved. The city doesn't have a sphere of influence, but this is the existing sphere of influence from a previous general plan. And so you can see it's really not really relevant to the landscape, just a rectangle on the map. In the 2016 general plan, we had a different look at what the proposed sphere of influence might be.
We have a request for you to speak louder.
Oh, okay. We have a proposed sphere of influence in the 2016 general plan. And this proposed sphere of influence wasn't ever presented to LAFCO for approval. And so it currently rests in the general plan without any action taken subsequently. The city became concerned, of course, about this situation, and the city council appointed an urban growth boundary committee to look at urban growth, of course, and the urban growth boundary committee established a scheme, a concept for establishing a sphere of influence. And I'd like to just say that this is not a recommended sphere. It's a point of discussion. It's a starting point for our community conversation that the City Council really wanted to present to the community so that we could hash it out, go over it, look at its configuration, understand the concept here. So the concept is two-tiered. The first tier in the concept are lands that are considered appropriate for development if the sphere would be adopted, and that would be orange. And then in the yellow are areas that are considered to be crucial for maintaining and conserving the city's overall historic appearance from a landscape perspective. That is, areas outside the city limits that might be necessary in order to protect that historic character. And so that's just something for us to understand regarding this particular map. The Urban Growth Boundary Committee struggled with urban growth boundary for a couple of years, and then finally decided that this two-tier concept is one that would be valuable for review by the community as a starting point for our conversations. And we've been having those for the past couple of days. And so it's important to understand some of the definitions here. I'm not going to go over these in detail, but first of all, I'd like to just say, is a sphere of influence necessary? And those of you that participated in our workshops the past couple of days understand that it is necessary. Government code requires that LAFCO approve a sphere of influence. And also within the sphere of influence, there can be an urban service area based on city service master plans. There can also be an urban growth boundary that's coterminous with the sphere of influence, and or within the sphere of influence that's established. And is an urban growth boundary necessary? Well, if an urban growth boundary is necessary whenever the general plan says that it is. And so that is why if we are going to consider a different sphere of influence than the one proposed in the general plan, or we're going to consider an urban growth boundary as a result of this process, that's a general plan amendment. And so that will be undertaken reviewed by the Planning Commission and City Council as a creature of the general plan through policy and graphics. That's not to say that other general plan policies won't have an effect on growth and development, because they all do, one way or another. So the sphere of influence will be given to LAFCO for determination, and these are the factors that LAFCO will look at. And basically, it's just a simple list. But these are common throughout California, and we will go through this process, and LAFCO will look at our proposed sphere of influence and make this determination for us. And then for the next steps, with respect to our sphere of influence and our urban growth boundary, or urban growth boundary, and our urban service area, if we have one, we're going to discuss with San Benito County our prospective changes. City will pre-adopt general plan and pre-zoning designations for our sphere of influence, areas outside the city. And we'll have to adopt a new CEQA document to address these changes. And that could either be an amendment to our existing general plan EIR, or it could be a mitigated negative declaration, or it could be EIR, depending on what the impact is then once the city council adopts the sphere, then we request that LAFCO process the sphere of influence update, and they'll look at our municipal services through a comprehensive review, and then they'll decide on the boundary and contents of the MSR. And I have to say that LAFCO, and once we present the sphere of influence to the county, and we reach agreement with the county, LAFCO will give that agreement serious weight. So that's a significant occurrence. Once we have agreement with the county, and LAFCO has been participating with us at each step of the way, so they're fully informed regarding what we're doing, and that's very important that they're involved. As with respect to this particular plan, it's a combination. We're looking at a community plan, sphere of influence, growth boundaries. We're also looking at growth and development in the south end of town, where a lot of land use, proposed land uses, and really it's a dynamic area. There's a lot of vacant land there. There's a mix of land uses, commercial, industrial, residential. There's some transportation and traffic issues down south that don't exist anywhere else in San Juan Bautista. And it's a critical area. So what we've done is we've folded this grant-funded specific plan program into our community plan process. So we have a hybrid planning program that consists of a more careful look at the southern end of town, along with a broad look at where our sphere of influence should be generally, and whether there should be an urban growth boundary in any of these areas. So this is a community plan, is a general plan, level planning effort, as I indicated. It will have the typical plan components. It'll have a background and purpose, land use and development standards. It will look at how neighborhoods will be formed within the planning area, look at open space, look at infrastructure, and then look at how we intend to implement these planning principles through an implementation program. This is a very typical approach with respect to general plan. And you can see in the first paragraph that those are all the areas that we intend to incorporate into the planning process, which we've been just started that conversation with the community during the past couple of days. So the community plan is a path. It's a path to the new sphere of influence boundary, urban services boundary, an urban-rural boundary potentially, or an urban growth boundary, municipal services review, and also toward an environmental document that will be adopted at the end of the process. And so that's an overview. Any questions about that? What we're doing and why we're doing it? Very good. Oh, one question.
What is the time frame?
We would like to have the community plan finished in fall 2022. So it's a pretty rapid process. Part of that is being driven by the fact that we have a significant portion of this program, 3/4 of this, or actually 2/3 of this program is grant funded. That grant has a time horizon, and it is a drop-dead time horizon. So we know we have to be finished with this September, October. Yes.
South San Juan, which is collectively known to anybody who's grown up here locally as Mission Vineyard.
I'm having trouble hearing you.
Yeah, can you use your outdoor voice?
Yeah, Mission Vineyard Square, South San Juan, Bautista, I think, if you're locals. So my question, or my comment is, you didn't mention that already existing in that really rich area, there is ag land and there is active farming going on right now. So it almost seems like incongruent to talk about housing and industrial growth in what is our own little area of farming, and it's very productive farming, very rich soil.
Can you
Yeah,
repeat,
that's a very good
repeat
comment.
the question?
Yeah, I think the question is, I think it may be more of a statement than a question, that ag land uses and open space, preservation, conservation in the south end of town are equally, if not more important than development opportunities in the south end of town. And I'm just paraphrasing there that these are attributes of the community that are important to look at from a preservation standpoint, however that happens, either in the course of development, through set-asides, or through outright zoning and general plan designations that protect that open space character. So definitely that is a part of the conversation that will occur at each table this evening. So very good. Question?
I'd just like to add that there is a Archaeological Resources in the planning area that was included in the 1998 general plan, and I've tried to circulate it among staff. Nobody seems to have a copy of it. But I think it's very critical that we consider that the south end of town is rich in archaeological resources and must be maintained and preserved.
So the comment is that the south end of town has very rich archaeological cultural resources that need to be recognized through the process. Yes?
You mentioned that this study is 20, I think 2/3 grant funded.
Yes.
What about the other third?
That's general fund funded
Of the city of San Juan.
by the city of San Juan Bautista. Yes. Right.
I have a question to Wanda. This San Juan Canyon Historic District, is this an actual district that is in place? Was it adopted? What's the legality of it? That's all.
It was identified and it was eligible for National Register nomination, but the property owners chose not to pursue it.
Okay.
Okay. It's difficult for each person to hear. I'm wondering if you can hold off the questions until we get to the tables and then present. Is that all right? Okay. So I'm going to give a broad overview. I'm going to ask Michael to help me out on the growth management approach that we're taking. It's hands-on. This is your town, and we just want to set up a format where your ideas can flow and be gathered and put into a meaningful form. So it's a very successful formula. I've been using this my entire career. When I launched my career, I came to realize that the best things we need in our country, technically we can do. We've got all kinds of amazing achievements. But getting people to agree on tough issues is much harder. So I went back, got my degree in a field called interpersonal communications, to come up with ways that people could share their ideas in a very nice way that result in getting most of the things they need. So that's the idea of building the community plan, is to take all of the elements like economic growth, protecting, preserving historic space, open lands, everything. That's what this whole process is about. We're going to actually read out to you some of the more important things that came out of the 5 sessions that have already been held. This is where we are today. We call it a charrette. It's something that is really going to drive the big engines of ideas forward. But we already held an economic development working group, the future growth, beautifully presented by Lavco, and then living, working, playing, and then the planning commission for technical reasons didn't happen, but it will happen next week. Then an open space preservation was today, mobility and transportation in San Juan Bautista was today, and now of course we're at the point of gathering your ideas at each work table. I want to start by combining how the best planning works and why, if you want a livable, walkable community, why you can't just do it with sidewalks and crosswalks. Those are easy. That's the really easy part. But if you're going to have a community, then you have to put the housing and other buildings and uses where it's most important. Perhaps you want shade, cooling effects, whatever. But it's not until you decide where and how to build your housing that people will actually walk. Does that make sense? It's like I lead walking audits all over the country, and the So this is the concept. I wanted to include some illustrations, photos of a couple of the working groups. Very well attended. Most of the meetings had 20, 25 people. That's pretty outstanding for a very small community. People ask brilliant questions. This is Bill Nicholson, by the way, from LAFCO. And he is probably the most desirable person you could ask for to be pumping your ideas to, because he cares about the outcomes. I hope this is readable to those of you in the back, but this is our summary of each of those 5 groups. And again, very good ideas that were presented that we now are able to take and build into the whole growth management strategy. Definitely, people want there to be jobs. They want housing for the people who are going to provide for that. And it's very important to come up with a mix of housing that people can afford, either to own or to rent. And that means that you build it in the right locations and then you come up with the right strategy. So your growth management plan is going to really help you get there with that. So that was the economic. The participants also shared a lot of ideas about the influence area and what needs to be considered and what needs to be really protected in each of these areas. And Michael, if you have any thoughts you want to add in, please do. But I was very impressed. The state requires you over a 5-year period to add 88 new units, but that is for a 5-year period. The numbers that are also presented fall somewhere between 80 and 145 housing units. And that's over a 5-year period. Am I correct on that, Michael? The next working group was living here, working here, playing here. What are the most important elements you want to consider as you go forward? So these are summarized very well. Without anyone telling us, on our last visit here, we realized that the center of your community is your post office. Right? Am I right about that? People go there to bump into other people. I call that bump intuitiveness. And it's pretty cool. But that's a very important element. It's also important to keep in mind that the Highway 156 at Alameda, it's like a huge river. How do you get across it, right? And so, fortunately, that's something that others are recognizing that from your Council of Governments. We had a beautiful conversation related to that today. And people are very interested in developing the De Anza Trail and other trails, and to see how many recreational facilities can be built and linked and connected. So all these things came up. And by the way, these are in print, and I think, James, you were able to get a number of these out at the workstations. You'll be able to add them at the workstations. Next, we got into the open space preservation, and really a dynamic group that came together for this. One that really surfaced for me was to maintain strong Native American connections. And we've got people that are here tonight that are able to express the importance of those ideas. Preserve old abandoned railroad tracks. I wouldn't have known where to look, but evidently you've got some old tracks that could become a trail, and we'll be digging into that more. Protect your creeks, the riparian zones around them, and truly honor the geographic, topographic, and migratory routes, everything. That all that needs to be built into your consideration. Our final session, the 5th one, was on mobility and transportation. A lot of ideas were gathered here, and these will flow beautifully into the active transportation plan, which comes up early in June. We'll be doing a whole round of activities as we did here. So with that, Bill Nicholson really gave us some top ideas about the LAFCO requirements. And I wondered if, Michael, you could add to that. I'd like to give your voice. Yeah.
Thank you, Dan, appreciate it. So Bill Nicholson came to speak. My name is Michael Groves. I'm president of the EMC Planning Group, and we've been doing planning in this area for about 44 years. I was born and raised in the area, so we've been around a little bit, and you know, we know that this is a plan that will challenge you to look at what is going to be preserved in this community, what do you want to set aside, we talked about view space, view shed, and you know, the sight lines that you see as you drive into town, as well as all of the other things that Dan's already talked about, historic preservation and those types of things, as well as the fact that the state of California is telling us, well, we have to build some more houses, and they're telling every jurisdiction that. So again, those are things we have to challenge ourselves with in terms of looking at how we preserve the character of the community at the same time as we look at what areas are possible for development within the community. So we talked with Bill Nicholson, who's the director of LAFCO. I invited him to come to a workshop session that we had yesterday and really just lay out for us what is the purpose of LAFCO. So while I say that, there is in the back, there's a thing that's called a Glossary of Terms. So I don't want to leave you hanging, because us planners get up and we start talking about all these acronyms like CEQA and community plans, and you're going like, what is he talking about? And you know, one lady here makes cookies. We know what she's talking about when she says cookies. We know that. So, and I said, no, I'm not going to have any. And then I ate one. And then I was like, okay, I have to have more. So, but anyway, long story short is Bill was gracious enough to come to us and really lay out what LAFCO does. And LAFCO essentially is the agency, it's a directive from the state of California. Okay, it's in government code. Local Agency Formation Commission is what it stands for. Local Agency Formation Commissions, there's one in every county in the state. And those commissions are responsible for any kind of boundary changes that occur. So that could be a city boundary, it could be a special district boundary, it could be a consolidation of boundaries or consolidating. You've seen a little bit in California where fire departments are consolidating and special districts are consolidating, or cities are asking special districts to provide those services. So there's a whole combination of boundary changes that can occur. And so they talk about it as an annexation. Well, in order to have an annexation of land to your jurisdiction or services to your jurisdiction, you have to have a sphere of influence. So that's why you've seen the term sphere of influence several times. And the sphere of influence is the jurisdiction's boundary in which you can provide services and provide services to whatever developments you have in that particular boundary. So some of you know all of this already, and some may not, so I'm going over it. If you have questions about it, I'm happy to talk more about it. What was great about these sessions is, and where we're heading to in terms of tables, is to be able to start looking at the city's boundaries. And we have a very confusing boundary situation in the sense that you have a sphere of influence boundary that was the big rectangle that Brian showed you earlier, and that's adopted by LAFCO, but it's not in the city's general plan. What's in the city's general plan for a sphere of influence boundary is not adopted by LAFCO. So you have this dilemma that, and I really honor Don and Brian for recognizing it and saying, we need to address this. I know it's not going to be an easy conversation, but we need to address this. We need to figure out what we're going to have for a sphere of influence and what are we going to have for our boundaries in the community. And then, of course, the conversation went further and said, some people said, well, we want an urban growth boundary. And that's a different tool than a sphere of influence, but it is a tool. And so that could be one of the discussion points at the table. So that's all I would say about the sphere of influence and, you know, what we have and what we don't have as far as that. Again, one of the conversations we had today, just the last piece, was we had a conversation about, well, how do you protect ag lands and how do you protect the hillsides? Do you want those in your sphere of influence? Do you want them in your city limits so you can designate them for agricultural land or for open space or for whatever they are? So those are other conversations that you can have as a part of this When we walk out of here tonight, my goal is for you to have made some preliminary determinations about boundaries. What would you like? Dan?
Great. Thanks, Michael. Great job.
We had one really good question come up. Thank you, Mr. Dassel, for bringing this up. And that is efficient municipal services. What does that mean? So when I started here, we had two projects that we embarked on. One was a water master plan, and the other was a wastewater master plan. And so what those are projections of our water and wastewater needs between now and the end of our general plan, which is 2035. So what we did was we anticipated growth in our city at about 1.9%, which is a great compromise. That rectangle is over 3%, 100 units a year. So we didn't go that direction. We went 1.9%, about 40 units over a period of time. So with that, we sized the pipeline to send our sewer water to Hollister for the growth that's in our general plan. So the project that we're working on to stop treating wastewater and send our wastewater instead to Hollister, we have an MOU agreement to do that. We have a commitment from the city to do that. We have designed 99% of the plans. We're almost ready to go out to bid. We hope to go out to bid this fall to begin the construction of our sewer plant. Graciously, we were able to increase our sewer rates to include the cost of that plan. So it's paid for and it's ready to build. So I just wanted to share that with you. And then on the water side, we're working on a water rate study right now. My goal was to get that done by June 30th. I'm not sure that it will. It's looking at, yes, another increase of as much as 15% on your water bill. So we'll have that conversation in an open forum as well. So we'll have a chance to hear from everybody. So that's coming. What does that mean? That means that we're going to import 65% of our water as surface water. So it won't be hard and it won't be salty. So it's going to be then blended with the well water that we have. And it's going to diversify our water supply and it's going to greatly improve our water supply. So these are both embedded in our water master plan and our wastewater master plan. And that's where these surface studies come from. So I just wanted to ground, because everybody knows that we have trouble with water and wastewater, that we're well ahead of the curve on that. And that's why this is following on the heels of having adopted those master plans. So I just wanted to share that.
Thank you, Don. Dan, you want to get going on the next discussion? I know we have one question here before we start.
Before we start, yes.
The only question I have is, I've been asked by one of the property owners that have you put into the sphere of influence, is there a way of taking them out of the sphere?
I don't know technically, but it sounds like from Michael that is correct.
The Manning property would prefer not being in the sphere.
Okay. Thank you. Now, the fun part. We've got tables set up around the room. We'd like you to self-select which table, who do you want to sit with, who do you want to not sit with out of your community. I think with the number of people we have here, 5 tables is about right. So self-select whichever table you would like in these first 5. And as soon as you get to the table, I'll give you some things we'd like you to do. You'll end up at 3 different tables tonight doing different things. So ideally there'd be 8 people per table, but maybe it'll end up 7 or 9. Who knows? So please populate a table. Pick whatever table you'd like to work at. It could be the same table, it could be a new one. But now, use different color markers. Write notes in the margins. That's why we made the margins really white. And draw little arrows to your markings so that we know where you would now most like to develop if you are going to have commerce, residential, mixed use, whatever. Does that make sense?
Does it include industrial?
And yes, everything that you're going to now develop, where you would think that that type of land use is going to be most important. Yeah, and use the red dots. And again, write plenty of notes in the margins. Is that okay? Pick the table you're choosing, folks. What areas are most important to protect? Everybody understand? Okay. Brian, do you want to help?
Yeah. So do you tell us about color coding? Oh,
Put a red dot on it.
housing is yellow, employment is red, and open space is green.
Sort of our land would be on the red.
Okay, so, and we have to agree.
We have to agree. So that's David, he's also planning commissioner. He lives in San Juan, grew up here, they work there. And this young man.
So the idea here is to use the dots, use the pad, use the pens, whatever method you want, to mark areas on the map that you would like to see preserved. And these are areas outside the city.
Oh, you want to go outside the city?
Yes, that's the whole idea.
You don't want to go inside the city?
Yeah, so
So then that white line column, that's our current boundary right now? This one?
Yes.
Oh, right here.
Yes.
Or is that our perceived?
That's, I think that's the sphere, the one that's just for discussion.
Okay, so what do we want to protect?
Go out any further, but you'd even preserve the stuff within your city limits.
So you're trying to go down First Street or?
That's what I would think. It's up to you. I mean, it's not my call, but you have to decide.
wouldn't you want to preserve this priority of You're saying
I'm saying all of it except for that little block of lots because there's some homes on it.
We already lost it.
And we already lost them.
Little chunk of land by the Bolero station.
But that's only on the front part of their lot.
Right here?
Yeah, it's only on the front part of their lot because they've got a fault line that runs across that lot. And so they're thinking about that part.
So we have 20 minutes, so let's make some decisions about, so you're suggesting this will stay for potential development, and then this will get, yeah, okay.
And then we're saying these stay just follow this.
I think, I mean,
Well, yeah, so it keeps going. Is the green going outwards or inwards?
well, I think you engulf it, so it'd be on all sides of it that you want to preserve, right?
So the main issues that we were looking at was preservation in the community and how that integrated with like walking tours, but additionally our historic resources in the community at large. So the mission, associated parks, outside resources that would be important for the community to understand and integrate into any plan.
So this is Mission Road right here. And right here. So everything. So it's all this stuff? Yeah. So do we want a big circle? Here you go.
So, just so you guys know, since you live in
We live in Hollister. We just have our business property right there, so we're not really familiar with,
a lot of Native American stuff going on in there. And so they wanted to put that on the National Register and protect it. But it never got done. So, because the landowners didn't want it protected. So, why don't we try to do that? Yes. Okay, let's see. I'm not much of an artist. Well, that would be archaeological. Oh, yeah, we can locate that too.
Because, I mean, that was going to be that cultural, trail. Isn't that going to maybe Lynn will know more?
No, I don't, but I figured I could try to track it.
Because it's the Alameda.
This is Amazon. Mission Vineyard Road, what is Mission? So, and the retreat's up here somewhere. I mean, it looks like it's already been developed. A lot of it has, but we can prevent it.
There's a sidewalk that runs through the park.
That's pretty. Behind the mission.
Where's your business? Oh, I'm sorry, Inspector, industrial zone right here. We're right across the street from the art park.
Okay, so just maybe circle like this. The trail or the whole
Is that
thing?
where you see the, like truck park and stuff? We have our trucks there and stuff. We have a trucking business.
Awesome. Did you not want
Thank you.
A number of us at this table want to preserve the archaeological sensitivity of the San Juan Canyon, and that's our concern, and the agricultural lands that exist now. Perfect. So we have a mix of ideas here. We blocked off this area because it's land trust. Everything that we've circled is areas that we don't want to see developed. I know that's a lot, and it's our dream map. We understand that the San Bernardino County Health Foundation owns this property. We're not sure where they're going to build, but we would hope that we could keep the view shed clean from the city view, and maybe they build on the opposite side. The archaeological areas we'd like to keep. Again, view shed here. Ottoboni property here, they indicate they like to be parkland. And then we have all the riparian areas that are kind of squiggly lines. The Anza Trail here. We'd like to see, the Land Trust would like to see connectivity and trails. Where is it, Lynn? Here? Or here. Okay. Anything else?
And the agricultural.
Oh, the agricultural lands below the mission we'd like to keep because they are viable, they're still producing. So unfortunately, we haven't included any industry or homes.
I think we thought our charge was strictly to look at what we wanted to preserve.
Yes, for this first exercise.
Yeah. So that's what we're talking about.
On San Juan County roads, they will hotel resort. What, is that still something that can happen? Are you aware of that?
I haven't heard anything like that. Rumors that I've heard include this parcel on the way out to the retreat center, this parcel here. They want to do some kind of like ecotourism. And right now they have a little cabin right here, I think. It's called clamping. So it's a tent, like in Yosemite Village, and they have Airbnb clamping out there, and they want to like promote their property as something like ecotourism to someone who's trapped in down. No, it's leaving.
Off the map? Okay.
I can share with you the relationship we have now. So I know Mr. Dassel because he just subdivided his property back here. Okay, on Mission Vineyard Road, and he subdivided it into 4 lots for his children, and he preserved the hillside. So he made 4 1-acre lots for his children and then his house, and then he preserved the back on the hillside and the whole front of it so it won't be developed.
Just these 4 here?
No, it's more this piece here that got subdivided.
I judged the last three they had.
But you'd have to,
Yeah.
I mean, they have refused to agricultural crop there. You'd have to.
Is there that much of it that's agricultural right now? The real rodeo ground?
Yeah, it is.
I exhibited there as a younger person and judged the last event. And that property is owned by the mission.
Yeah,
In
that's
fact,
what I
the
thought.
handrails are still.
Yes,
Yeah, they are.
I walked.
They're not in good shape. Yeah, they're not in good shape.
They're there. So we want to preserve that? I mean, we've got to get somewhere here.
Preserve or improve
I would like to improve it, get it,
what sticker is that?
yeah, how do we do that?
Here, open space, here, there's actually colors.
Improve the handrails on the mission?
No, improve the rodeo area. She put
Exhibit
employment, she meant
was
open
to
space.
promote funds to restore the mission. And that's a venue, could be a venue there beyond just, you brought it up, rodeo. I mean,
Yeah.
automobile shows, car shows, dog
Yes.
shows.
Talk about going to bring people to town.
Just, it's a great site, you know. It's,
Well, then why don't we put employment
it's
down?
overgrown
Put
now.
It's a
employment.
mess, yeah.
But what we did discuss was the potential involvement of the state of California and the mission and livery state. I mean, disgraceful, the condition there. And there are other communities that have involved the state of California, Columbia, for example. It's a hidden gem. And talking about bringing people to this community to help our commercial sector. In addition to that, we discussed more involvement with the Monterey Bay Area Diocese and the mission, and the resources that the mission has, the old Catamatories facility. I believe they own somewhere around 10 to 15 acres below the mission that's in agricultural ground as we speak. The old grandstand is in deplorable shape. I see car shows, dog shows, lawn, amphitheater kind of thing. So that conduit with the Monterey Bay Area Diocese, which kind of directs the business end of the mission, needs to be exhaustively researched along with state parks. The Lavanino barn was brought up. There's a dot on that. It needs to be considered and preserved. The other thing that was discussed, probably the thing that we discussed the most, and I suspect that we'll see the same thing at the next table. We all talk about view shed. We all talk about preserving agriculture, rangeland, what have you. I recently went through a process with the county on a piece of property that our family trust owns, and it took roughly 4.5, almost 5 years, and I don't even want to tell you how many dollars we spent to get that developed. View shed's important, rural agricultural is important, but we all have to remember somebody's got to pay for that.
Yes.
In many cases, a lot of this agricultural land that has dots on it tonight, and it's our idealistic dream to see that that's preserved in perpetuity. Is that the right word?
Yeah.
Perpetuity. Perpetuity.
Perpetuity.
Thanks for the help. A landowner is paying property taxes on it. He's paying liability insurance on it. He's being responsible with repair and maintenance in most cases. It doesn't even come close to the expenses what it takes to continue to own that property. That is an idealistic dream that a lot of people have to recognize that there's an expense in that. And so it's real good that we want to see all of these things preserved forever, but there's an expense in that. The rebuttal to that is the Williamson Act. And I don't know how many of you are familiar with how the Williamson Act works, but the Williamson Act is a contract that lasts anywhere from 10 to 20 years. You can get out of that Williamson Act if you elect to join it. But that there is a liability there, and it's paying back tax base and expenses to do that. So we can all walk out of here tonight thinking that we're going to put dots on here and it's never going to be developed. But there's an expense on that as to how that really happens.
Thank you for
And this
saying
is
that.
just a business here, and the city needs to recognize, I'll finish in a minute.
Sure.
The city needs to recognize that they need income, small light manufacturing, industrial, jobs, coupled with the ability to have reasonable housing at a reasonable building rate, whether you're in the city or in the sphere of influence. Did I miss anything?
Great.
Okay, thank you.
We kind of went off, not by the rules, but we kind of acknowledged the spaces that we felt were important and connected those spaces up to outside areas that we thought needed consideration as well, including internally the mission, the state park. The schools came up as something that we should connect to as far as preservation and the outside lands. One of the major issues was this entrance area where it should be frozen for any development in the future. So basically linking up the communities to its resources and definitely preserving what we have.
Go ahead, please.
Okay, some of the open space that we wanted to preserve had to do, of course, with the Ag Trust land that's already there, preserving this hillside, especially coming into town. If there's housing, limiting that in this area. This was kind of a question mark because I think this is the Manning property, so I was not sure what's going on with that. Ag presence, we want to keep the agricultural presence on this side of town over here. And this was, what was the name of that family again? Audubon. They wanted an open space over here. So employment, you know, this is more the commercial areas kind of that we were looking at. And particularly, we want to kind of mirror this gateway here that comes in on McCullamy and Monterey Street to kind of like what we did with the Windmill Market area over here, so that you have something similar on both of those entrances into town.
You guys correct me if I misspeak about any of this. I think one of the things we agreed on was the entrance into town from 101 into town. You know, it'd be important to preserve the visual assets there, keep it rural, keep it undeveloped. Let's see. We were talking about some places where some housing could be put in. It was noted that the health campus that's proposed here needs housing for their employees here and also from Hollister. And I can speak, you know, for our company too, Recology. Right now, I'm not a Recology representative. I'm just a resident, but I can say that we have trouble also hiring people because they can't find affordable housing. So maybe, where did we say that would be? I think right here. Oh yeah, right around here. So make that the same color. Anyway, what else, guys? We're going to expand out.
Yeah, all the way to Michigan.
Oh right, draw a broader border, a wider border here.
Okay, so anyway, this particular group got kind of stuck on the idea of preserving agricultural land that was surrounding the city itself, basically, and how we do that from within the sphere of influence. And we did that by marking out particular areas on the south side of San Juan Bautista going into the northeast side, which is all part, already touching the border of prime agricultural land. And basically that's really what we wanted to do in this particular segment that we're in right now, is preserving ag land. Fantastic.
Put the red dots where we thought industrial should be or commercial. We did put a big red dot on a cement plant. Dan's idea would fit good in there, among other things. And we also thought that there were some other areas around here that could have, this is already zoned industrial. It's cannabis oriented right now. It hasn't quite worked out, but who knows in the future. And we put the yellow dots for housing out here, housing here. We have housing at the San Benito County, or not San Benito Health Foundation. It's going to build there. And I believe that they are planning on mixed-use housing with a second story, which would be, I call them apartments for lack of a better word. We also have some housing out here and here. And we put already housing where it's already existing in Rancho Vista. I don't know why. Teresa? Okay. And so then we drew lines where the sewer line is going, so we would all know that. And then we drew lines where the water's coming in, so we'd all know that. And I forget what the green is all about. Oh, that's right. This dot here is right behind JJ's. It's an empty lot right now. And we thought it could be a small boutique hotel, much like the Posada, right there. Yeah.
Well, fantastic. Anything else from this group? Well, let's congratulate them.
If I'm not mistaken, and looking at areas that are already open, that aren't farmland within the city for limited housing development, and then looking at the area over by the Valero entrance to town and Neal's Market and such for some level of commercial, if that's desired. And then there was some discussion about the always controversial corner of 156 and the Alameda, where Leal's property is and the open space that's there, and whether to have some sort of designation for perhaps a tourism-related commercial facility there, as opposed to the gas station that has been talked about quite a bit.
It's there.
Yeah, so aside from the hacienda,
I mean, the gas station.
the gas station is, right.
Gadwell. No, it's a different project now.
Well, I'm just telling you what this group desired.
He's right on, spot on.
Yeah, he's representing us, not defending
I'm not
the
endorsing or not endorsing the gas station.
We're just talking about development.
So that generally is kind of the crux of it, is really focusing on infill as opposed to some of the commercial and stuff that we've seen in some of the other presentations farther out. Because you have to remember, the farther out you get from the city, whether it's commercial or housing, the more the costs that are going to be that come with that, the more costly it is for infrastructure and all the other things that come with that. So that's about it.
Fantastic. This, to me, was what I was dreaming of from the time the contract got signed, to bring people together around something that's often controversial. And I think the process worked in that you came together in small groups, you had discussions, you figured out what worked for you, and you got to hear what each table came up with. Overall, did it work for you? Okay, good. I find that when people do this, it helps build the social capital of the whole community. That the next project you take on, you'll have even more people engaged and involved and so on. So I want to thank all of you who really gave your heart to this. I now want to ask Michael and task Michael can we now take all this, what we've heard. I'm seeing a lot of unanimity. Among all the tables, the principles seem to be the same. Am I right about that? So Michael, if you can give a good summation. This is your field. You do this all the time.
So first, just thank you everybody for being here and doing this. I really appreciate it. I want to acknowledge the high quality that you have in terms of a city manager who's standing next to me, and in terms of an assistant city manager and community development director. And the reason I do that is because I work in a lot of cities like Dan does, and you don't always get people that are so involved in the community that sometimes you'll get people that are, I'm sitting at this level and, the rest is just the community, right? And they're just engaged in the community. They want the community to be successful. They want your input. And they're the ones that actually said, let's take this on, let's do this, let's actually pull the community out and have a conversation about what we're gonna do in terms of boundaries and growth and preservation and all of that. So first, I wanna start there. And then the second piece is, my thought is that from here forward, we will take what you've done on each one of these tables and try to consolidate that into one or two alternative maps and bring that back for some kind of a maybe joint city council planning commission meeting, in which it's not so much a forum meeting, but a workshop type meeting where everybody could sit and see what we think the result was from tonight. And then have another chance to have some comments on that and communication about that, a dialogue about it, particularly with your decision makers. And I think that's a really important piece of it. And then that'll help kick us off to creating the community plan, because we have a very short window, which is between now and essentially September, to come up with a draft community plan. And it all starts with a project description, which is what you're doing on the maps. So if that helps everybody, I think that's the best place for us to go in terms of being able to wrap up tonight and know where you're going to go in the future. So we'd like to try to do that meeting within the next 2 months to keep the momentum going, and then be able to start working on the actual plan document itself. Anything, Brian or Don, you guys have to wrap up?
I would welcome comments from anyone. Michelle, thank you for being here. What were your thoughts?
I thought it was wonderful to have the community input. And so many people that are here have the history of the town and the surrounding areas, the historical areas.
Yeah.
So it was good.
Okay. Benita Link will run a nice article for us. How about it?
I'm going to blister you.
Mr. Dawson, your feedback was awesome, Mr. Dawson. Any thoughts?
Overwhelming. So much appreciate the opportunity to express our concerns and interests and wishes.
Dan? Nope, you said
I think the key is going to be when Rose indicated the follow through.
the fall through.
So it's fun to sit around and put stickers on a map and so forth, but therefore what? How does that get implemented, executed? What does it turn into?
So on that point, the idea is, again, and I'll just say it one more time because I think it's important so you kind of know where it's going, is the community plan is really for those areas outside the city limits. So the project boundary is for all of the area outside the city limits that you choose to put in that project boundary. So we'll come up with a boundary that we think is appropriate based on what we heard. Then we put land uses within that boundary. We draw a sphere of influence line. So the ultimate goal is to amend the general plan to add this community plan as a part of the city's general plan. Then once that's done, there's the whole LAFCO process we talked about, in which we would go and ask for a sphere of influence amendment that would probably shrink the existing sphere of influence that you have now, okay, and have it more coterminous with the areas that you want to see developed and the areas you want to see preserved, either outside or have a growth boundary that preserves those areas outside. So what Dan's talking about is just that next step of implementation, which is the community plan being an amendment to the general plan, which will go before the Planning Commission and City Council ultimately in the fall for adoption. And then there's a whole nother piece of the process that will have to go from there that Brian's been talking about, which is the implementation, which is the LAFCO piece. So, and the other thing I wanted to say before I forget, and I keep forgetting, is I really want to acknowledge the fact that the diocese is here represented and the mission is here represented, which is the center of your town. So it's really important to know you have a centerpiece that we can work around. It's another one of the tools you have in your tool belt that is amazing, in addition to the opportunity for trail systems and all these other things that are available to the city. So,
if I could, I just want to acknowledge also Tammy Adams, the president of the Preservation Fund, for your guys' icon in this community.
Yeah.
And is working with community members to protect that heritage. And I appreciate the city as well and reaching out and having this conversation. Brian especially has come over, and thank you, Don. I think it's a long time coming, and you know, we want to be in the room and we want to be good neighbors and we want this community to succeed.
and we saw something today, that, and I'll be the bold one to say it, but we saw something today that is really, really special, and that's the mission, the diocese, and the Native American, part of the Native American community sitting side by side today and saying that they will work together. And that doesn't happen up and down the California coast much.
Brian, did you want to add anything?
No, I think it's really a great evolution in terms of this program to have everybody come together and do this. And really, I think that for us, it's going to be very important for us that when we actually finish this program, that people will look at it and say, oh yeah, I know where that comes from because I was there or I participated, and I recognize that comment in something that my neighbor or my affiliated organization had to say about what the community should, how the community should grow and evolve, and what should be conserved and preserved. We understand where that comes from in the plan, and we may not be perfectly happy with the result. We know where it comes from, and we all have a consensus that's best for the community. And if we can get there at the end of the day, I think that's going to be a great achievement for San Juan Bautista. So that's our goal.
Thanks, Brian.
Thanks, Brian. Yeah,
So
and it's part of the city's website, so there's a link to go to the page, and there's a front page of both community plan and the active transportation plan. And then when you open that up, there's two pages. One's the community plan and one's the active transportation plan. And we'll have the ability to comment on that. Do you want to talk about that at all, or is there anything new that we need to think about that we've done in the last couple of weeks on those pages?
The
Turn this way. Okay.
All right. On the community website, we have added the glossary of terms, so any of the different terminology that we have used during today's meeting, anybody can go on, download that, and look at it. We have the maps available on that website as well. And are we going to be including the notes that we've taken on these community meetings?
And the videos.
And the videos. So information from these gatherings will also be included on that website.
And there's also a comment. There's a place we've got a widget on there that will allow people to comment. We've been working on that. We had one widget, we didn't really like it too much, but I don't know where that's going to go, whether the city ended up buying that or not.
Probably not, but I think that what we'll have there is an interactive widget that enables people to comment, and then you should be able to pinpoint, where that is, where that comment
So
is
the interactive map as well.
Right.
Wiki maps.
Yeah, so there'll be opportunities to comment, and then there'll be other meetings that will be held, as I mentioned, maybe a joint planning commission city council meeting, not in the form where they're sitting up on the dais and they're making decisions, but a forum where it's, more of a workshop forum where people can talk with each other, but we want the decision makers to start seeing where this is growing and be able to comment on it as well. So thank you for asking. That's a really good question.
Sure. The commissioners want to say something?
Yeah, this is great. I'm really happy with the turnout, but I'm also wondering, is there going to be maybe another meeting like this to maybe go out there and outreach to more city members? Because I'm kind of thinking this is, I look at the room and I do the percentage of how many people now live in my town, this isn't a full representation of everybody.
Absolutely.
And I understood that there'd be more meetings, and it sounds like we're sort of moving towards, let's consolidate the data tonight, let's present it to the policy makers, decision makers, and I was not understanding that would be the process.
So let me just say, first off, I'll be very blunt. We have a very limited budget, number one. And that budget is limited because Don and Brian have worked hard to get some grant money, and they're also paying some money out of the general fund. Secondly, there will be further active transportation plan meetings. There's several of those scheduled going forward. What I'm suggesting is the meeting that I'm talking about is not a decision maker meeting. So I always like to get the decision makers in the room. We have a Board of Supervisor member here today. We have a council member here today. It's nice to have you guys here, but in the end of the day, I'd like to get all the decision makers in the room with the community. So it's not a decision maker meeting, but it's a decision maker meeting with the community where they actually can look at these maps and make some comments and decisions about what's nice to come out of this meeting is to have a couple of alternatives of what we saw here. And then bring those alternatives and put them up and have people look at those and say, well, that's not what I said, or that's what I did say.
So maybe the goal is, since this isn't a representation of the community that I live in, I think we need to have another shot at it, is that maybe you will have some blank maps along with what you consolidate tonight, so that people that didn't come here tonight have an opportunity to maybe mark the maps that night, and that's just one more opportunity to get some more input. Because, really have to flush this out, and I understand budgets and the amount of grant money that was put into this, but, this is something that's going to be permanent. This is going to be our city, our county. We really need to have an honest, we need to represent everybody. We need to get more data. This is just not enough.
Yeah, this is not representative of our demographics. It's wonderful that all these people turned out, but let's think about who's not here.
But everybody
And
is
it's
invited.
not expensive to translate the flyer. It's not expensive to have an interpreter here, et cetera.
We had the flyer was in Spanish.
I didn't get one in Spanish.
We are doing an open house tomorrow, so whoever you can get to come to the open house, we can share, we can gain more knowledge and information. Open houses are another venue, but it's been scheduled, it's been promoted tomorrow.
Right.
And the city council meeting tomorrow at 6 is an in-person and Zoom hybrid meeting to summarize what the conversations of the week. So it should be an hour to 90-minute conversation. The public's welcome to join in that conversation.
Because I had a suggestion to the young gentleman that's on your team, because I said to him early on, I said, I'm kind of here as an observant, but also kind of participating. And I really wish there was, a more diverse crowd, younger people, culturally diverse. And I think maybe another effort would be like the school. You have young parents and families that are moving here. We're talking about growing our community. That's like
an important, infrastructure here. And, they maybe moved here, lived here because of certain attributes of the community. I think we should get some input from our parents. And they're busy right now. And they're busy, yeah.
Well, let me also say that if you have volunteers that are willing to go door to door or a parent-teacher meeting, whatever, we would give you all the information you need in order to do that. The more a community reaches out to other members of the community, the better representation you
Trust me,
get.
I did like 5 or 6 Facebook groups this morning before I went to work.
Is there any way on the website that you could do some sort of interactive, where people could say, oh, I'd like to see this on this map?
Yes,
I mean, is
we're
there any
doing
way, at
exactly
least
that.
on the website?
There will be an interactive map.
And maybe if we can get out through our communities, that at least on the website, we can give input, let's do it now, so that it's within your timeline.
Yeah. So there will be an interactive map. You can pinpoint things, you can write notes and comments, and then that'll be an ongoing conversation.
And does someone,
Much
do
like
you
the
have
dots we have.
availability for the school? Can you reach out to them and maybe,
You talking to me?
yeah?
I have no connection to the school.
She's
right over
here,
Superintendent.
Okay, so
Ask Michelle over here.
perhaps she can also put this up to the parents, right? Maybe it could be her connection to get the parents involved, right? Before this next meeting, so at least you have more people.
Right, right. Right?
All right, thanks everybody.
Thank you for your feedback.
It's been a great help to the team. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Folks, I really want to thank you for coming out tonight, sharing such great ideas. Change is hard, but when we do it together, collectively, and listen to one another, and then think about the greater community, what we wish for it to become, we make good decisions. So thank you so much. We really appreciate your engagement, your involvement, and keep at it.